The story of the dragon and the Raistar. The night was painted with a silver moon, yet the silence that blanketed the mountain valley was too heavy to be natural. Not even the wind dared to whistle through the forest of Blackpine, and the wolves that often howled at midnight hid with their tails tucked, as though some unseen terror pressed down upon them. Deep within the shadows, the ground trembled, not from an earthquake, but from something far older, far more dangerous. A dragon had awakened. Legends of this beast had circled the villages for centuries. They whispered of its crimson scales that shimmered like molten rock, of its wings vast enough to blot out the sun, and of fire that could reduce armies to ash in a heartbeat. No one had seen the creature for over 100 years, and some doubted it still lived. But when the tremors began, when the smell of smoke drifted on the midnight air, the villagers knew the stories had never been lies. In the center of that same valley, a boy sat awake in his small wooden hut. His name was Raistar, a name given to him not by family, for he had none, but by fate. He was quick, sharper than the hawks that circled the cliffs, and carried within him a spirit that refused to bow, even when life struck hardest. Though only 17, his hands were calloused from training, his eyes fierce with hunger for greatness. Unlike the rest of the villagers, Raistar did not tremble at the thought of dragons. To him, the beast was not only real, it was destiny. For years, he had dreamed of a fire-eyed monster descending from the mountains, and in those dreams, he stood before it, not as prey, but as challenger. Some nights the dreams ended with him consumed by flame, other nights with him standing atop its neck, a conqueror of legends. He never knew which was true, only that the dragon called to him, louder with each passing year. And tonight, as the earth shook and the distant roar echoed like thunder, Raistar knew the moment he had been waiting for had arrived. But fate is cruel and never simple. The dragon was not merely a beast. It was a guardian of secrets, an ancient keeper of power long buried. Those who sought it were often consumed not by its fire, but by their own greed. Raistar did not yet know this truth. He only knew that his path would take him into the dragon's shadow, and that nothing would ever be the same again. The first roar shattered the night. It tore across the mountainside like a storm ripping through the sky, a sound so immense that it rattled every window in the valley village of Blackpine. Chickens burst from their coops in a panic, dogs barked and howled, and terrified children clung to their mothers. The older villagers fell to their knees in prayer, whispering the old chants they had not spoken in decades. To them, the roar was not simply sound, it was a reminder of the curse they had always feared would return. Torches flickered to life as men stumbled out into the square, their faces pale, voices trembling. At the center of their gathering stood the village elder, Orvik, a hunched man with a beard like snow and eyes clouded with age. He leaned heavily on his carved staff, as if the wood itself was the only thing holding him upright. "The dragon has awakened," Orvik said hoarsely, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "And it comes not for hunger, but for judgment." Fear spread like wildfire among the people. Some cried to abandon the valley and flee south to the cities. Others shouted for warriors to gather, though none among them had ever faced a creature beyond wild wolves and bandits. Yet, through the chaos, Raistar stood silently in the crowd, his eyes fixed on the northern ridge, where faint trails of smoke curled into the starlit sky. His heart pounded not with fear, but with an almost electric anticipation. That night, while others hid in their huts, Raistar packed his satchel. He carried little: a waterskin, a coil of rope, flint, and his father's blade, an old, weathered sword, its edge dulled from years of neglect. His father had perished long ago, slain in one of the endless border wars, but the sword had remained, a relic of a man Raistar barely remembered. It was not sharp enough to kill a dragon, but Raistar clung to it all the same. As he prepared to leave, a voice stopped him. "Raistar." It was Alira, a girl of his age, with copper hair braided down her back and eyes bright as the morning sky. She had grown up alongside him, often his rival in games of speed and strength, though lately their rivalry had softened into something warmer, something unspoken. You're not thinking of going up there, are you? He paused, tightening the strap of his satchel. I am. She stepped closer, anger mixing with worry in her voice. You'll be killed before you even see it. This isn't one of your daydreams, Rai. This is the dragon of Blackpine, the destroyer. The gods cursed our valley with it. Raistar's jaw tightened. And someone must face it. Do you want to wait until it descends and burns the village? Until we all cower and beg for mercy? No, Elira. If it has awakened, there's a reason. I need to know why. She stared at him, her fists clenched at her sides, and for a long moment, the only sound was the distant crackle of flames on the mountainside. Finally, her voice softened. If you go, promise me you'll come back. Raistar didn't answer. He couldn't promise what fate itself had tied to him. Instead, he slipped past her and into the shadows of the forest, his steps swift and silent, his heart pulling him toward the roar like a moth to fire. The climb was brutal. The path up Blackpine Ridge twisted steeply, littered with loose stones that slipped beneath his boots. The higher he climbed, the thicker the smoke became, stinging his throat and burning his eyes. And then, just before dawn's first light touched the horizon, he saw it. The glow of fire reflecting off the rocks above, and the silhouette of wings stretched wide against the sky. The dragon. It perched upon a jagged peak, vast and terrible, its scales glowing faintly as though forged in the heart of a volcano. Even from a distance, Raistar felt its power radiating through the air, an ancient, suffocating weight pressing down on his very bones. He fell to his knees, not out of choice but because his body simply buckled beneath that force. The beast lifted its head, eyes burning like molten gold, and in that instant, Raistar understood. The dragon had not merely awakened. It had been waiting for him. The sun had only begun to bleed over the horizon when Raistar stood frozen before the beast. Dawn painted the jagged ridges in crimson and gold, yet even the sky's brilliance paled against the dragon's presence. Its scales shimmered like embers locked beneath black iron, each movement scattering sparks into the smoky air. Its wings stretched wider than the span of the valley below, and when it breathed, the earth itself seemed to tremble in fear. Raistar clutched his father's sword, but the blade felt like a toy in his grip. His knuckles whitened, sweat stung his brow, and yet he did not run. His heart thundered, not with terror, but with defiance. For years, he had dreamt of this very moment, and though the beast's power was beyond anything he had imagined, something deeper held him in place, a certainty that his life had always led him here. The dragon lowered its head, nostrils flaring. Hot breath washed over Raistar, scorching and heavy, as though the air itself turned molten around him. Its golden eyes narrowed, studying him, weighing him, and then it spoke. Not in words of the tongue, but in a voice that struck straight into Raistar's mind. So, the child of Ash has come. Raistar stumbled backward, nearly losing his grip on the sword. His lips parted, but no sound came, until finally he forced out a hoarse whisper. You can speak. The dragon's teeth gleamed in the light, curved fangs sharper than any steel. Not speak. Command. I am the fire that was before your kind learned to stand. I am the guardian of flame, the last heir of the ancient oath. And you, Raistar, its eyes burned brighter, like furnaces being stoked. You are bound to me. The words, though unspoken, seared into Raistar's chest. Bound? He shook his head violently. No. I came to fight you, not to whatever this is. You're a monster. The dragon's chest rumbled with a sound between a growl and laughter. Monster? Perhaps. Yet your dreams brought you here, did they not? Do you think a chance that for years you have seen my shadow in your sleep? You were chosen, child, marked by fire long before you drew your first breath. Raistar's grip tightened on the sword. His mind reeled with disbelief, but his heart remembered. The dreams, the fire, the endless feeling that something greater waited for him in the mountains. Could it be true? Was his life not just a chain of hardships, but a path set by fate? No, he muttered, shaking. I am no one.
Just a boy from the valley.
I won't be chained by your curse. The dragon's eyes narrowed, and for a moment its vast wings lifted, blotting out the rising sun. Fire licked at the edges of its teeth, and Raistar braced himself for death. But the flames did not come. Instead, the beast lowered its head again, so close Raistar could see the cracks in its molten scales, the centuries etched into its hide. Then prove it. The voice boomed within him. Prove you are free. Strike me. Raistar's breath caught in his throat. Strike a dragon? His sword was dull, his arm trembling, his body dwarfed 100 times over. To attack was madness. But something in those burning eyes demanded it, not obedience, but will. The dragon was not testing his blade. It was testing him. With a cry torn between fear and fury, Raistar lunged forward and slashed with all his strength. The blade struck the dragon's snout, sparks exploding where steel met scale. The sword shattered in his hand. Raistar fell to the ground, panting, staring in disbelief at the broken hilt. He expected laughter, or worse, death. Instead, the dragon's voice rumbled through him once more. Good. Raistar blinked. Good? You raised your hand against fire itself. You dared. Few would. Remember this, Raistar. It is not steel that binds us. It is spirit. The dragon lifted its head, wings spreading wide, and in that moment Raistar felt something ignite deep within him. Not a flame that burned his flesh, but one that seared his soul. Heat surged through his veins, his vision blurred with light, and when he gasped, he saw that his hand, once gripping the broken hilt, now glowed faintly with fire. He stumbled backward, horrified and awed all at once. What have you done to me? The dragon's voice was low, almost solemn. I have awakened what was always there. You are not merely a boy of the valley. You are Raistar, the flame-bearer. The wind roared as the dragon leapt into the sky, its wings whipping storms across the ridge. Fire streamed from its jaws, curling into the dawn as it disappeared into the heavens. Raistar fell to his knees, clutching his burning hand, his breath ragged. The mountain was silent once more, but within him, everything had changed. He was no longer just a boy with a broken sword. He was marked, chosen, cursed. He did not yet know which. But one truth rang clear in his heart. His destiny and the dragon's were now bound together. The descent from Blackpine Ridge was harder than the climb. Every step felt heavy, as though the fire inside Raistar weighed him down. His hand still glowed faintly, an ember pulsing beneath his skin, and though he tried to clench his fist or hide it beneath his sleeve, the warmth burned through. It was not pain exactly, but neither was it comfort. It was alive, and it terrified him. By the time he staggered back into the valley, the village was already stirring with dread. Smoke from the dragon's awakening still drifted faintly across the sky, and the people gathered in hushed clusters, whispering rumors of firestorms and omens. When Raistar stepped into the square, all eyes turned on him. He looked ragged, clothes torn, sword broken at his belt, but there was something else that made the crowd draw back, the flicker of flame dancing faintly across his hand. Mothers clutched their children, men muttered prayers, and a circle of fear widened around him. Raistar. A voice cut through the murmurs. Elira pushed through the crowd, her braid undone from a sleepless night, her eyes sharp with worry. She grabbed his arm, pulling him aside before the others could surround him. What did you do? What happened up there? Raistar tried to steady his breath. I saw it. The dragon. I faced it. She searched his face, waiting for him to speak sense. But the way he said it, with no hesitation, no doubt, made her heart lurch. You're serious? He nodded slowly. It spoke to me, Elira. Not with words, but in my mind. It knew me. It said I was bound to it. That I was chosen. His voice cracked on the last word, half in awe, half in despair. Elira stepped back, shaking her head. No, that's not possible. The dragon is a curse, Rai. Everyone knows it. To be bound to it means, she stopped, unable to say the word aloud. Means what? Raistar pressed. Before she could answer, the elder Orvik approached, leaning heavily on his staff. The crowd parted for him, though their fearful whispers followed in his wake. His clouded eyes seemed to pierce through Raistar, and when he spoke, it was with a voice burdened by knowledge older than the village itself. "The boy speaks truth," Orvik rasped. "The dragon does not awaken for mere chance. It waits. It chooses. And now it has chosen Raistar." The crowd erupted. Voices shouted in anger and fear. "He's cursed. He'll bring the beast down upon us all. Banish him before it's too late." Raistar clenched his fists, heat flaring in his veins. The whispers felt like knives, every word slicing into him. He wanted to shout that he had gone to protect them, not to doom them. But before he could speak, Orvik raised his staff, striking it against the ground with surprising strength. Silence. The command rippled through the square. Slowly, the noise subsided. Orvik's gaze fixed on Raistar. "You carry the flame of the first bond. I had prayed it would never pass to another, but fate is cruel and unmoving. Do you even understand what burns inside you, boy?" Raistar swallowed hard.
No.
"All I know is that the dragon awakened something in me." The elder's voice dropped lower, heavy with dread. "What you bear is not a gift. It is a tether. Long ago, our ancestors made a pact with the dragons. One man, one beast, bound by fire. Together they guarded the balance between our world and the shadow beyond it. But greed poisoned the bond. Men sought power. Dragons sought dominion. And so war came, fire against flesh, until only ruin remained." The villagers leaned in, their fear thickening with each word. "In the end," Orvik continued, "the last dragon swore to sleep, guarding the ancient fire until one day a new bearer would rise. If that day has come, then darkness stirs once more. And if Raistar is bound," his words trailed off into silence. Raistar's chest tightened. His life, his choices, his very blood. None of it felt like his own anymore. He looked to Alira, but even she could not meet his eyes. At last, she whispered, "What does this mean for him? For us?" Orvik's clouded eyes closed, his face grim. "It means the boy must decide whether he is the valley's salvation or its destruction." The crowd shivered at his words. Raistar felt their stares, fear, suspicion, even hatred. The fire in his hand pulsed stronger, as if it fed on their doubt.
For the first time, he wondered if they were right.
Was he cursed? That night, while the village barred its doors and prayed for protection, Raistar sat alone on the edge of the forest, staring at the faint flames crawling across his palm. Somewhere above, in the endless dark, a dragon's roar echoed faintly across the mountains. And deep inside, Raistar knew his path was only beginning. The days that followed were filled with unease. Raistar walked the village paths, but every step drew whispers. Children hid behind their mothers, men spat on the ground as he passed, and the elders muttered prayers under their breath. The fire in his hand had faded to a faint glow, hidden beneath his sleeve, but that did not matter. Once marked by the dragon, the people no longer saw him as Raistar the boy. They saw him as Raistar the cursed. Alira alone stayed by his side, though even she struggled with the weight of it. She tried to speak to him of ordinary things, the river's flow, the harvest, the weather, but her words always faltered when her eyes fell on the hand he kept clenched and hidden. Between them stretched a silence neither dared to break. One evening, unable to bear the stairs, Raistar fled to the forest beyond the village. He trained there alone, swinging the broken hilt of his father's sword as though it were whole. Sweat poured down his brow, his arms ached, but still he pushed himself, as if through force of will he could carve destiny into shape. It was then he felt it again, the fire. It flickered inside him like a second heartbeat, pulsing with each breath. He dropped the hilt and stared at his hand. The ember glow had returned, brighter this time. He raised it slowly, and as he focused, the flame answered. A tongue of fire burst forth, coiling in the air like a living serpent before vanishing into smoke. Raistar fell to his knees, trembling. He had called the flame. Not by accident.
By choice.
What are you doing to me? He whispered to the night sky, though he knew the dragon was far above, watching. He felt its presence even now, a shadow pressing against the edges of his soul. But no answer came. Only silence. Back in the village, unease grew into anger. Crops withered in the fields, struck by an unseasonal frost. Wolves prowled closer to the huts, bold enough to snatch chickens in daylight. The villagers whispered that Raistar's bond had cursed them, that the dragon's fire had drawn shadow over their lives. It was during a gathering in the square that the fear broke into fury. A farmer named Varric, broad-shouldered and bitter, stood before the crowd. "We cannot suffer this any longer," he shouted. "The boy is marked by the beast. He brings ruin with him. If we let him remain, the dragon will descend and burn us all." Others echoed his cries. "Cast him out. Send him to the mountains where he belongs. Better one life lost than all of ours." Elira tried to speak, her voice cutting through the noise. "You would condemn him for something he did not choose? He went to face the dragon when none of you would." But her words were drowned by the roar of the crowd. Then Orvik struck his staff upon the stones, silencing them. His old eyes burned with rare anger. "Fools! Do you think banishment will free you? The bond cannot be broken by exile. Whether Raistar stays or goes, the fire will follow. Better you learn to trust the boy, for the time comes when his fire will be the only light against the dark." The villagers muttered, cowed but not convinced. Raistar, standing at the edge of the square, felt the weight of every glare. He wanted to speak, to plead, but the words caught in his throat. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps they were right. Perhaps he was the doom they feared. That night, he returned to the forest, but this time, he was not alone. Elira followed, her step soft but certain. "You can't keep running, Rai," she said quietly, watching him stare into the flames dancing from his hand. "If you don't master this, it will master you." He turned to her, his eyes burning as fiercely as the fire. "And if I can't? If it consumes me?" Elira stepped closer, her hand brushing his, unflinching even as the heat licked her skin. "Then I'll be there to pull you back." For the first time in days, Raistar felt something break through the darkness. Hope. But fate gave them little time for comfort. On the horizon, beyond the Blackpine mountains, riders stirred. Not simple travelers, but men clad in black steel, their banners bearing the mark of a crimson serpent. They came not for trade, nor for peace. They came for the dragon, and for the boy bound to it. The first sign of their arrival was the sound of hooves. At dawn, while mist still clung to the valley floor, the thunder of horses rolled from the northern road. The villagers stirred nervously, gathering at the edges of the square as a column of riders emerged from the fog. They were no common travelers. Black steel armor gleamed under the pale sun, their helms shaped like serpents, their cloaks dark as ash. At their head rode a man taller than the rest, his presence sharp and cold like a blade drawn in silence. His armor was etched with crimson lines that glowed faintly, and in his gauntlet hand he carried a lance tipped with obsidian. The village fell into hushed silence as the riders dismounted. The leader stepped forward, removing his helm. His face was pale, his eyes like chips of ice, and a scar carved deep across his jaw. His voice carried a chilling authority. "I am Lord Calith, commander of the Order of the Serpent Flame. We seek the boy." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Mothers pulled their children closer, men exchanged fearful glances. Everyone knew whom he meant. Elira's hand found Raistar's instinctively. He tensed but did not pull away. Orvik pushed forward, leaning heavily on his staff. "You have no claim here," the elder said, his voice steady though his body trembled. "This is a free valley." Calith's thin smile cut like a knife. "Free? Nothing is free. Not when fire walks among you. The dragon has awakened, and with it, the bearer of its flame."
"We are not here to bargain, old man."
"The boy belongs to us." The villagers gasped, their eyes darting to Raistar. The circle of fear widened once more, but this time it carried a dangerous edge. Relief, almost, that someone else might take their burden away. Raistar stepped forward before Orvik could answer. His voice was raw, but steady. I don't belong to anyone. Kalitha's eyes narrowed, studying him.
Ah.
The fire speaks. He circled Raistar like a predator, his armor clinking softly. Do you even understand what you carry, boy? That ember in your blood is not a gift. It is a weapon. With it, you could command legions, topple kingdoms, burn the world to cinders, and rebuild it in your image. With us, you would rise above these peasants. Without us, his smile turned cruel. The fire will devour you.
Slowly.
Painfully. Raistar's chest tightened. The words slithered into his mind, feeding the doubts he had carried since the dragon first touched him. Was it true? Would the fire consume him? Could these men truly teach him control? But then he felt Alira's grip on his hand tighten, grounding him. He met Kalitha's cold stare. I will not be your weapon. The commander's expression hardened. So be it. With a flick of his hand, the riders drew their blades. Steel sang as they advanced, the air thick with menace. Villagers scattered in terror, dragging their children into huts, slamming shutters closed. Only Orvik, Alira, and Raistar stood in the square. The fire within Raistar surged, pulsing with the rhythm of his pounding heart. He could feel it begging to be released, clawing at his veins, whispering promises of destruction. His broken sword lay useless at his side, but his hand burned with living flame. Kalith raised his lance. Seize him. The riders rushed forward. Raistar thrust his hand out instinctively. Fire erupted, not a spark, but a torrent. A wave of flame burst from his palm, roaring across the square. The riders staggered, shields raised, as heat scorched their armor. Horses screamed and bolted. Villagers shrieked from behind shuttered windows, and the cobblestones cracked beneath the force of the blast. When the fire cleared, Raistar stood trembling, his chest heaving, smoke rising from his palm. The riders had been driven back, though none lay dead. Their armor glowed faintly, as though tempered to withstand flame itself. Kalitha's eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. Yes, he said softly. The fire is strong in you. Stronger than I imagined. He lowered his lance, its obsidian tip glowing faintly red. But you cannot yet control it. And without control, boy, fire always consumes. With that, he mounted his horse in a smooth, practiced motion. The other riders followed, their formation unbroken despite the scorch marks across their armor. Kalitha's final words echoed through the square as they rode out. We will return. The flame cannot hide from the serpent. Silence fell heavy after their departure. Smoke still lingered in the air, the stones of the square blackened by fire. The villagers crept from their homes, their eyes wide with terror. Not at the riders, but at Raistar. He brought them here, someone whispered. They'll come back. And worse. We're doomed. Orvik leaned heavily on his staff, his voice grave. The Order knows the truth of the bond. They will not stop until they claim him, or destroy him. Raistar stared at the blackened stones, his hand still smoldering faintly. He could feel their stares pressing into his back, the weight of their fear growing heavier with every breath. Alira touched his arm gently. What do we do now? Raistar lifted his gaze to the mountains, where the dragon's shadow seemed to ripple across the sky. His voice was low, but firm. We find the truth. Before they do. The square still smelled of ash when the dawn broke the next morning. Black streaks scarred the cobblestones, reminders of the fire Raistar had unleashed, and though no one dared approach him directly, the whispers carried louder than ever. He'll burn us all. He can't control it. The serpent flame will return, and when they do, he'll join them. Raistar sat at the edge of the forest, his head bowed, his hand bandaged though the fire beneath his skin still glowed. Alira crouched beside him, her face pale from the night's terror. She had seen his fire, seen how it burst like a storm, wild and unstoppable. And yet, she did not turn away. You can't stay here, she said quietly. They're afraid of you. Even if they don't banish you, the Order will come back, And next time, they won't leave without you. Raistar clenched his fists. Then I'll fight them. Alira shook her head. Not like this. You barely controlled the fire yesterday. If Orvik hadn't pulled the villagers back, you might have killed them along with the riders. The words cut deep, but Raistar knew she spoke truth. His chest ached with frustration. The fire inside him was a storm without a master. He could summon it but not shape it. He was as much a danger to himself as to his enemies. It was Orvik who found them later, leaning heavily on his staff as he stepped out of the trees. His old eyes, clouded but sharp, settled on Raistar. The bond burns brighter each day. If you do not learn its truth, boy, you will not survive what comes. Raistar looked up, weary but resolute. Then teach me. The elder's expression darkened. I cannot. My knowledge is shadow and memory. Only one can teach you now. Raistar already knew the answer, but hearing it aloud made his stomach twist. The dragon. Orvik nodded slowly. The last of its kind, the keeper of the first fire. If you would master the flame, you must seek its will again. But beware, dragons do not guide for kindness. They test. They break. And if you fail, his voice faded into the forest silence. Raistar rose to his feet, determination hardening his jaw. If I do nothing, I fail anyway. Alira stood too, her eyes fierce despite the fear in them. Then I'm coming with you. Raistar hesitated. He wanted to refuse, to shield her from the danger ahead. But when he met her gaze, steady and unflinching, he knew there was no stopping her. Then together, he said softly. They left at dusk, slipping into the shadow of Blackpine Ridge. Behind them, the village closed its doors tight, some praying for their safety, others praying never to see them again. Above, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, not of storm, but of war. The climb to the dragon's peak was harsher this time. The path felt steeper, the air heavier. Raistar's fire pulsed stronger with each step, as if the mountain itself drew it forth. By the time they reached the jagged summit, night had fallen, and the sky was alive with stars. And there, upon the peak, the dragon waited. Its vast wings folded like mountains, its eyes glowing like suns in the darkness. It did not roar, did not threaten. It simply watched. Raistar stepped forward, his heart hammering. You gave me this fire. Now teach me to master it. The dragon's voice rumbled through the stone beneath their feet.
Teach? No.
Fire is not taught. Fire is claimed. Its eyes shifted to Alira. And yet you bring another. Why? Raistar stiffened. Because I don't stand alone. Not anymore. The dragon's chest rumbled, smoke curling from its jaws. Then let us see if that is truth or weakness. The mountain shuddered. Fire erupted from the ground, forming walls of flame that encircled Raistar and Alira. The dragon's shadow loomed above them, its voice thunderous. Face the trial. If you would command the fire, then you must endure it. Alone or together. The flames surged higher, heat scorching the air. Raistar's hand burned with light, his veins searing with power. Alira clutched his arm, her breath ragged, her courage trembling but unbroken. Raistar met her eyes, and in that instant he understood. This was not just his trial. It was theirs. The fire roared, the dragon's gaze bore down, and Raistar stepped into the flames. The fire closed in like a living storm. Walls of flame rose around them, not merely heat and smoke, but fire alive with memory, fire that whispered with voices of those who had been tested before. The mountain peak had become a crucible, and at its heart stood Raistar and Alira. Raistar's skin burned, not from the fire outside but from the blaze inside him, the dragon's gift, or curse, that tore at his flesh with every heartbeat. His hand glowed brighter than molten steel, and sparks licked across his veins, threatening to consume him whole. The dragon's voice rolled over the crackling storm. Claim it or perish. Fire bows to no master who doubts himself. Raistar grit his teeth, sinking to one knee. He could feel the fire trying to burst free, wild and violent. If he unleashed it as he had before, It would destroy everything, including Alira. His chest clenched with fear. Alira crouched beside him, gripping his shoulder despite the heat searing her skin. Her voice cut through the roar of flames. Raistar, don't fight it like it's an enemy. Fire isn't only destruction. It gives warmth. It gives light. Remember what you are. Her words struck something deep within him. He thought back, not to battles, not to power, but to nights as a boy, sitting by a small fire, alone, watching the sparks drift into the dark sky. That fire had not devoured him. It had kept him alive. He closed his eyes. The flames surged within him, but instead of pushing against them, he let them flow. He did not fight the fire. He embraced it. The storm inside shifted. The pain gave way to clarity. The flames were not a curse, but an extension of himself, his anger, yes, but also his hope, his love, his will to protect. Fire could destroy, but it could also shield. It could also save. Raistar rose, his eyes glowing like twin embers. He stretched out his hands, and instead of exploding, the fire curved around him and Alira, forming a dome of golden light. The raging storm of flame no longer threatened them, it danced with them. The dragon's vast head lowered, its molten eyes reflecting the controlled blaze. At last you see. The walls of fire crumbled into ash, the mountain settling into silence. For the first time, the dragon bowed its head, not in submission but in recognition. The fire does not make you, Raistar. Raistar makes the fire. Alira gasped as the heat faded, tears streaming down her smoke-streaked cheeks. She looked at him, awe filling her eyes. You did it. You're not just wielding it, you're one with it. Raistar's chest rose and fell as he steadied himself, but a new strength burned in his veins. Not wild, not chaotic, but steady, like the heart of a forge. He turned to the dragon, his voice firm. The order is coming. They'll burn everything to claim this power. Will you help me stop them? The dragon's wings unfurled, casting shadows across the stars. I am the last of my kind. My fire will not live forever. But through you, it may yet endure. If you stand, Raistar, then I shall stand with you. The night trembled with the beat of colossal wings. They returned to the valley at dawn, the dragon soaring above them like a second sun. The villagers, once afraid, fell silent, staring up at the crimson titan who circled in the morning sky. And at its side walked Raistar, no longer just a boy of the village, no longer a cursed orphan, but the one who bore the fire of legends. The Order's banners appeared on the horizon soon after, shadows of steel and flame. But this time, the village did not cower. They had Raistar. They had the dragon. And together they would not bow. Raistar stood at the edge of the village, fire glowing in his palm, Alira at his side, and the dragon watching from above. For the first time, the fear in his chest was gone. This was no longer destiny's burden. It was his choice. And he chose to burn a path not of destruction, but of hope. The fire roared, the dragon's cry shook the sky, and Raistar lifted his flame high. Not as a weapon, but as a promise. The story of the dragon and the Raistar had only just begun.